too. So I'm Kiana Shiroma. Oh, thanks, Lauren. I'm Kiana Shiroma. I'm the director of the Pre-Health Pre-Law Advising Center here at UH Manoa. It's great to meet you all. I know a lot of you are incoming students. I hope you're having a great first semester here at UH Manoa. I also want to thank Lauren. She is one of our senior peer leaders, and she's just been so amazing and not just helping with this workshop, but for all of Pat. So I appreciate everything that she's doing as well. So she's here helping with the tech stuff, letting people in the room and whatnot. So thank you, Lauren, also for creating these beautiful slides. So we're here today to talk about your pre-med orientation, right? So helping you prepare for what's to come in terms of your medical school journey. And so, just some real quick housekeeping requests that we have is to please make sure that your mic and camera are off. You can also input um, any questions that you may have in the chat. And then also slides will be sent via email. Um, Lauren, can you let me know in the chat if I'm echoing for you or if it's just for a couple of participants? Thank you. If it's okay, if it's echoing, it may be that you might be close to another device that's showing the Zoom as well. So yeah, let me know if that doesn't work out for you. If not, you might have to log out and log back in. And then if you're still not exactly like 100% sure about going into medicine, then just FYI, we have another presentation that we'll be sharing this upcoming Thursday. And this is for, again, like more exploratory students or students in other health fields, like for example, dentistry, pharmacy, PT, OT, and physician assistant. So please feel free to sign up for that one as well to find out what the steps would be to get into those kinds of schools. So there's four parts that we're going to go over today. So first is our general overview of being a pre-med student. And then second, already going into a little bit of what your application will entail when that time comes for you to apply to medical school. And then third would be important resources for you to know about on your journey. And then last, but definitely not least, would be Q&A with our medical student panelists, whom we're so thankful for joining us today as well. So as you probably already know, doctors do a variety of different things, right? They diagnose and treat patients, prescribe medications, do surgeries, and are essentially just responsible, right, for the well-being of their patient. However, there are many different types of doctors, right, that are available for patients. And so these doctors may vary depending on specific diseases, like, for example, on oncology. And then there might be other physicians who focus on a specific body system or body part, right? So it just all kind of varies and depends. So there's a wide variety for you to choose from. But on the other hand, please don't feel free or don't feel the need, excuse me, to have to choose a specialty already. Like that's what medical school is there for you for, right? Is to explore and see, which kinds of fields you're interested in. And then from there, right, you can decide. So don't worry about having to decide right now. That decision will come much later on. So again, as you probably already know, the timeline to become a doctor is a very long one, right? So your undergraduate career is going to take around 4 years to complete, and then comes medical school, and then after that comes residency, which will depend again on the specialty, which can range from 3 to 7 years. And then if you want to further specialize, then that would be an additional fellowship of at least a year. So it is a long journey to ride on, to go on. And because of that, I do want to make sure that as your pre-health advisor, that you're really certain, right, on this path. And so that's really important for you to get experience in, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Another big reason why I want you to take this decision seriously is that I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you, but medical school is really competitive to get into. So 6 out of 10 applicants are not accepted. So, in other words, 40% of applicants are accepted into medical school. And so it is really a competitive field. A lot of the applicants who did get accepted into med school were reapplicants, meaning that they applied again, right? And so we really want to make sure that your application is strong, right? It's of strong quality as opposed to quantity. And so I'll go a little bit more into what that means in that your application, when the time comes for you to apply to medical school, once you're nearing your undergraduate graduation, would consist of 3 parts. So GPA, MCAT, and experience. And schools kind of vary a little bit in terms of, how much each of these areas weigh. But generally speaking, these would be the 3 main parts. Also, I forgot to mention that if you have any questions or concerns, then you can put those in the chat. And you could also start typing questions in for the medical students who will be speaking later on in case, I don't know about you, but if you don't type it right away or if I don't type it right away, then I tend to forget. So you can put those questions in already in the chat too, so that those will be queued up when the time comes. All right, so the first part of your app that we're going to go over is your GPA. And so that would include all classes, right? Every class that you've ever taken, that would include the GPA, or GPA would include those classes. But then in addition to getting an undergraduate degree, you would also need to complete prerequisites for the schools that you're interested in applying to. And so on our website and in this chart here, we have a list of common prerequisites of medical schools. And as you can see, it's not a huge surprise, right? A lot of biochemistry, and physics courses, right? In addition, there's also English and math. And so this list is of like prerequisites, meaning you have to take them in order to be able to apply to these schools. We also have 2 other lists that we want you to look at. So the second one would be recommended classes. So not necessarily required to apply to these medical schools, but oftentimes recommended. And because it's so competitive to get into medical school, we do recommend that you take these recommended classes to be more competitive. But then also a lot of these courses are or have content that will be studied or examined on the MCAT too. So including psychology and sociology. Um, that third set of classes would be MCAT classes too, right? So these courses would also have content that would be covered in the MCAT. So you want to make sure that you take those as well, even if they're not even recommended by medical schools. We would strongly recommend that you take them to be able to do as well as you can on the MCAT. And so, with all of these classes in mind, this would be kind of like a sample timeline for you in terms of being able to apply to medical school in 4 years. But everybody is a little bit different, right? For various reasons. So it's not just the prerequisites, but then also your application timeline, your requirements for your major, maybe multiple majors, or also minors and certificates. And so there are so many different pieces that would come into play when making your academic plan. And then also trying to overlap the prereqs, right, with everything else that you already need to take. And so we want to make sure that you do well in all of these classes because again, right, like GPA is so important for medical school. So, just make sure that you meet with all of your advisors, depending on what your major is, and then also with PAC, right? So we can make sure that you're on top of your medical school requirements. And so as you can, right, like use all of the services available for you. And then like I said earlier too, it's really about quality over quantity. And so for GPA, that means we do strongly recommend that you get a really high GPA as much as you can. And so I just wanted to share this chart with you. So This chart shows you the mean GPAs for those who applied and got accepted into medical school from UH Manoa. And so as you can see in the second column with the general applicants, so all applicants, right? Like anyone who applied to medical school for 2023 admissions, the mean GPA for BCPM. So BCPM stands for Biochem, Physics, and Math courses. So what that means is that they take all of these classes that you've taken in biochemistry, physics, and math, and then they make their own GPA from that for medical schools to look at. And then, like I said earlier, right, your cumulative GPA that all applicants, I'm sorry, that all of your classes will create. For those who applied in general was a 3.39, and then cumulative was a 3.54. But then you can see the last column was for accepted students, and you can see there's a big difference, right? Like with BCPM, the 3.6 as opposed to a 3.39, and then cumulative is nearly a 3.7 as opposed to closer to a 3.5. So again, it's really about how well you do in these classes, right? So it's not about rushing. It's not about trying to graduate in 4 years or taking a ton of credits in one semester. It's not about that. It's really about focusing on how well you can do in the classes. And so even though I showed you a traditional 4 year plan, actually nowadays, a lot of applicants take at least one or maybe even more gap years, meaning that they take time from when they graduate to when they actually apply to medical school. So that way they can maybe spread out classes or just have more time to get more experiences, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The second part of the application would be your MCAT scores. And so the MCAT stands for the Medical College Admissions Test. So it's basically like four different areas that you'll be tested on, and all of these are multiple choice, right? So it sounds easy, but it's really not, because it's a really, really, really hard exam. It's not just about knowing the content, but it's also about being able to apply it to questions. And you'll be asked tons of questions that you'll have less than 2 minutes to answer. And you'll be doing this over and over again for 7.5 hours. So it's literally a day's worth of just answering multiple choice questions as quickly as you can on the areas that you see here, right? So again, biochem, physics, a little bit of math, and then also psychology and sociology, right? Which is why we have or recommended those classes earlier on. And so because of this super long marathon exam, we do recommend that you start preparing to study around a year ahead, meaning like you just get all of the materials together, right? And then that would be the first 6 months ahead. And then afterwards, like when you get closer to the 3 to 6 months before the actual exam, then that's when you would like really focus on studying then. But ideally, I would recommend that the year before you want to start medical school is when you take the exam. And so that way you have multiple times to retake it if you need to before you submit your application in the summer of your junior year. And so I know it's a lot to consider, but for now, what I would recommend doing, especially for the incoming students, right, is to go to class, right? Take good notes. Don't throw your notes away. Don't throw away or sell your textbooks like I did when I was an undergrad. Keep everything, because you want to make sure that it's not just the grades, right, that you're trying to get, which is obviously really important, but you're also trying to learn the content of these courses, because later on you're going to have to apply all of that knowledge to the MCAT later on when you take the MCAT in your junior year. And so really, like, you want to make sure that you learn the content. So see your professor or the teaching assistant if you have any questions or concerns. Also, something to remember or keep in mind is that you will probably require or need a letter of recommendation from a science professor when it comes time for you to apply in your junior year. And so really you want to make sure that you start cultivating, right, these connections with your science professors earlier on if you can. All right. And then the last part would be experiences. And so there are a variety of different ones for you to choose from. But ideally, again, as your pre health or pre med advisor, my main concern for you for experiences is to make sure that this is the right field for you because there are so many different aspects that can either appeal to you as a physician or maybe not, right? So, for example, I know it sounds like really fun and awesome to be responsible for the well being of others, but really it's a huge responsibility and it's very stressful. And for some applicants, they're not willing to sacrifice their work life balance. And so you really want to make sure that you can handle that, right? And you also want to, uh, be 100% certain that your interactions with patients as a physician is what you want in everyday life too. So that, and then also you're going to be possibly dealing with a lot of like blood and guts, right? And bodily fluids of other people. So to make sure that you are comfortable with that, you got to make sure you got to have direct contact with this, right? A direct experience to make sure that, with all of these things considered, that it's still the right field for you. Because again, right, it's going to take so many years of your life. You want to make sure it's the right decision for you. In addition to that, when you're thinking about what experiences to pursue, there are other kinds of like larger questions that you might want to ask yourself. So this is from the director of admissions at JAPSOM. So JAPSOM is a John A. Burns School of Medicine. So it's the only medical school in the States at this point. And so some other questions that she wants you to consider when, engaging in these different kinds of activities is to think about like what's important to you as a future physician, right? So also what can you do to stand out as an applicant? Maybe thinking about possible leadership opportunities that come up, later on in your undergraduate career. Maybe those can help you stand out as a leader, right? And then in addition, admissions committees also want to see how you prepared yourself for medical school as a future physician. And so those are the kinds of things that you want to consider when looking at different activities to participate in. To demonstrate to admissions committees that you're ready, it's not just about the grades or the MCAT, but it's also those kinds of like traits and characteristics that you want to demonstrate to the medical schools that you have as well. And you'll do that through your activities. And so they're looking for specific kinds of what they call core competencies or like traits, or like I said, right, like characteristics that they are looking for in future physicians. And so in general, there's four different areas. So there's thinking and reasoning, right? So the scientific, critical thinking, written communication skills, as well as science, right? So more specifically, human behavior and living system. And then also intra and interpersonal communication skills as well, right? Because in the future, as a physician, you're going to be leading a healthcare professional team. So obviously, medical schools want to make sure that you're able to not just work with others, but lead others, right? In that kind of capacity. And so to do so, you need to get leadership experience, right? Or other kinds of related activities as an undergraduate. And so these can be in a variety of different ways, right? You can volunteer, do community service, research, leadership, like I mentioned earlier, direct patient contact, internships, and shadowing. So these are just some areas that you can pursue. And then later on, the medical students will be able to share what they have done previously. And although there are definitely trends in terms of what medical schools look for, so this is JABSOM, for example, and you can see, right, like a lot of the applicants have very similar experiences. On the other hand, like what exactly you do can totally vary. You'll hear in a little bit how every single medical student on this panel did very different things, right? And so there's not one set way to go about getting these experiences, but at least getting different kinds of activities in different areas will definitely help you demonstrate to admissions committees that you're well-rounded, right? And that you're ready to be able to be a physician. And then also going back to letters of recommendation from these activities, right? You'll have supervisors from whom later on you'll be asking for letters of recommendation. And so we do have a web page too. Lauren, if you can put the link for this webpage in the chat, that'd be great. And then that way you can start looking at different opportunities that we have. And then you can see, which ones are right for you. Especially nowadays with so many online events like today's one, it's really easy to see, what's out there to get more information on these kinds of opportunities that come up. But ultimately, I do want you to shadow as soon as you can. Thanks, Lauren. Because again, right, we want to make sure it's the right field for you. And then also, medical schools strongly encourage shadowing as well. And then once you kind of get down into it in terms of like which opportunities to look into, there are other just kind of more logistical kinds of aspects that you want to consider, right? Like the time commitment, because regardless of what I'm telling you in terms of activities, first and foremost are classes, because once you get the grade, that's it, right? Like you're stuck with them. And so you want to make sure that you're able to balance that really well, or balance your activities really well with your classes. And then also, just being on Oahu, we also have to consider location and traffic, especially during rush hour, right? Like now. So you just want to be considerate of that too. And then going back to what Dr. Asano said earlier, right, about really thinking about what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, because you're going to have to really be able to talk about those things in your application and then later on in future interviews with medical schools. One other thing that you can, or another way that you can look for opportunities too, would be to follow us. And so we do have a newsletter webpage that you can sign up for. And then thanks, Lauren. She put our Instagram profile link in the chat too. And so what's great about the Instagram profile is that we have like much quicker posts, right? Much more time sensitive opportunities that come up. So for example, like right now, we just posted one for dental assisting and then another for medical assisting. And so actually those will not hit our monthly newsletter because the physician and the dentist, they get so many applicants that they ask us to take down their posts after a couple of weeks. So, if you're interested, go to our Instagram ASAP, get the contact information, and then apply as soon as possible because, yeah, that post won't be there within the next couple of weeks. And then similarly for other opportunities that come up, these patient contact experiences are very rare to come by. So once they're up there and you see it, apply as soon as you can. Okay. And then thanks, Lauren, for also putting in the subscription link for our email newsletter. So we just send out one every month. So it's not too much to handle. We won't spam you, I promise. All right. And then the last thing is to make sure that whatever you do, make sure that you keep track of all of your experiences. And so again, when it comes time for you to apply to medical school, you're going to need to input all of this information in your med school application. So you want to make sure that you keep track of this, right? So I tell applicants, please do so because I don't know about you, but I can't even remember like what I ate for dinner like 2 nights ago. So how am I supposed to expect you to remember what you've done, years before, right? And then put that in your application then. And so there's different ways that you can keep track. To be really honest with you, I don't care how you do it as long as you have this information, right? So whatever makes sense for you. However, we do have this handy dandy experience log, and I'm going to ask Lauren to put that in the chat as well. And so you can just make a copy of it. It's a Google Sheet, and you can start, using this to just track everything. And so, yes, you can go back for the logistical information, but what I really want you to also focus on would be the experience description because in your application, it's actually not going to be like a resume kind of description. In that part, you're going to be talking about how you've worked on these core competencies that we talked about earlier, right? So this is how you're going to stand out with your application and your experiences, is how you write about them in your app when the time comes. Okay. And so I know that was a lot of information. So just to summarize, one part would be the courses, right? So you have the courses in there. You're going to try to take those as early as you can so that you have all of that content in your head to then start studying for the MCAT when the sorry, when the summer of your sophomore year comes up. And then from there, you're going to take the MCAT ideally in the spring semester of your junior year, and then apply in the summer of your junior year, and then go through the whole application process, right? So that would include interviews during your senior year. Medical schools usually send their decisions in like March or April, and then you would start med school a year after you apply. And so usually med schools start like in July or August. And so, on top of all of that, you need to do your experiences as well, right? So, it's just a lot to do in 4 years. So, again, like the gap year is really something that I want you to have in your head already in the beginning so that should you need or want more time, which a lot of applicants do. It's very most of the applicants now do take at least one gap year, then you can just spread everything out, right? So again, it's like quality over quantity, and then even just quality of life too, right? Like you want to make sure that you are just doing well mentally and emotionally too, right? Throughout your whole undergraduate journey. All right. So moving on to the application itself, we definitely recommend that you open one now. And so, uh, Lauren, I'm going to ask you to put the link for the AMCAS app in there now. So that way students can start opening it, right? Just to look around. So don't type anything in yet. But just to see what I'm talking about, right? To get a better understanding of what the end goal is, as opposed to, kind of wondering and guessing, right? You can already see what it's going to be like now. Thanks, Lauren. You're the best. Okay, and then next, moving on, I do want to prepare you for the additional costs that will come with being a pre-med student. And so that would include preparing for the MCAT because usually you have to buy your own materials. You can borrow from us in our lending library, but it's only temporary. It's not, the lending period is not very long. But then also there's going to be application fees that cost hundreds of dollars. Interviews oftentimes will be in person, so you have to pay, right, to get there. And then when you do get into medical school, right, it's going to cost a lot to move. And then obviously the tuition itself, not just for undergrad, but for medical school, and then cost of living as well, right? And so, again, what to do right now is to start budgeting, start saving. I know that sounds gross, but really, I do recommend doing that so that, again, right, it's all about preparing ahead and then making your life easier in the long run. So UH Manoa has a bunch of um, resources that you can look at. And so we have the financial literacy program that has a lot of great resources, as well as STAR scholarships, with which merges like a lot of scholarships for UH Manoa in one place. There's also ASUH, so that's like the student government of UH Manoa, so the Associated Students of UH, and they have their own set of smaller scholarships as well. And then we have like larger resources as well, right? So FAFSA and then Hawaii Community Foundation for additional resources for scholarships too. If you are considering like really set on medicine, then I would strongly recommend that you apply for our early acceptance program with Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine. And so if you're interested, then basically what that is that you would apply as an incoming student, and you can apply even up until your sophomore year. And if you have at least 2 years left and you get accepted into this program, then you'll be guaranteed a seat in Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine when you graduate. And so if you have the minimum composite scores for SAT or ACT, as well as a GPA, then you may not even have to take the MCAT, right? So this program is huge. And what is like the most like bizarre thing about this is that very few applicants apply, even though it's just like, even if it's a safety plan, right? Like a backup plan in case the medical school that you do want to attend doesn't work out, it's still great to be part of this program. It's a free application. The app is really easy to complete. And then if you decide to not attend, then you can just withdraw at any time. There's no kinds of consequences for students, which is why I entered in this early acceptance program for UH Manoa. So it's really easy to apply. So instead of that crazy schedule that I mentioned earlier, this would be your plan instead. And so there's fewer classes. You don't have to take the MCAT, right? So it's a lot more manageable that way. So I would recommend applying if you're seriously considering pursuing medicine, because again, it's just a really safe backup plan for you. Okay, so to help you manage all of this that I just talked about, and everyone is a little bit different in terms of what they need to do, right? Like what your plan will look like. I do strongly recommend that you schedule an appointment with one of us every semester. And then, Lauren, I'm going to ask you to put the advising link in the chat as well. And the reason why we do every semester is that we do have a schedule for you. So first semester would be making sure you're in the classes. And then after that would be making sure that you're engaging, right? Like doing those experiences that we talked about. Sophomore year would be kind of like getting all of these things together. And then from junior, senior year, that's when we really start focusing on the application itself. And then that red line is where you would be meeting with either myself, Dasha, our other academic advisor, or we also have advisors who volunteer their time from JAPSOM. And so that would be Doctors Chen and Fong. All right, and then last, like I said earlier, we have, I'm sorry, third to the last, we would have important resources that we would encourage you to look into. So first would be Pre-Health Career Corps. They have a bunch of other opportunities too. They provide advising as well. So they would be great to participate in. And then we'll put the link later on in the chat or by email. We also have the Pre-Med Association. So there are Pre-Med student group who's super, super active, who has a bunch of different kinds of events. Thanks, Lauren. Just put the link in the chat for PMA. They are open for students to join. So I would recommend, yeah, definitely partaking in those. They have community service opportunities as well, and opportunity services as well. And so, that would be a great way to kind of like try on these different community service organizations and see if that's something that you might want to commit to. And then maybe choosing that for one of your longer term activities. And then, regardless, right, PMA has a lot of leadership opportunities. They have different committees that you can participate in. So, this is one of the fewer ways that you can get leadership opportunities or experience. And so it's a great way to participate in that. We also want to make sure that you feel supported throughout your undergrad journey. So we do have our pre-health undergrad mentoring program through PAC. And so this would be being mentored by an upperclassman, right, who is also an undergraduate, ideally in the same field as you if you want. But if you do want to sign up, the deadline is coming up soon for our orientation. So Monday, September 23rd. So make sure you sign up for that as well. And if you're unsure, if you want more information, then we do have our info session 2 on the 27th. So yeah, Lauren put the link for that in the chat as well. Thank you. And then next we have the medical student mentorship program as well. So this is a little bit different, right? This is a medical student mentoring you. So you can do both, obviously, right? You can have an undergraduate mentor and a medical student mentor, which I would strongly recommend. And so the app period is going to be in a few days on September 13th. And so we do strongly recommend that you sign up once that app opens. And then Jenny, one of our med student panelists, is also on MSMP, and so she can talk more about that then in terms of what they'll do. So Jenny, we can definitely go back to that slide later on as well. And then with that, actually, I'm going to hand it over to them now. So I just want to thank Maya, Kristen, and Jenny for joining us after what I'm sure is a really long day of medical school. I'm just going to ask you to unmute, turn on your cameras so that they can see who you are. So again, thank you so much for joining us. I think we're going to, yeah, okay. Perfect. And I will ask you to